At least 5 people, including a child, have died in the early hours of this morning trying to cross the Channel from France to Britain. The French Coast Guard said their boat was carrying around 110 people, and the nationalities of those on board is not yet clear. Well, that news broke just hours after the UK government passed controversial legislation which will allow it to deport asylum seekers who arrive in the country on small boats to Rwanda. Under the scheme, those deported will not be able to return to the UK, even if their asylum claims are deemed to be legitimate. Human rights groups have said the plan is inhumane, while opposition politicians have called it expensive and unworkable.
After years of opposition in Parliament and challenges in the British courts, the Conservative UK government's controversial plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda will now become law.
My lords, Rwanda is a safe country that has proven time and again its ability to offer asylum seekers a safe haven and a chance to build a new life.
Under the legislation, some asylum seekers landing in the UK will be sent to Rwanda for their claims to be considered. If they are accepted, they will stay in Rwanda. If they are rejected, Rwanda can deport them back to the UK, though it is unclear what would happen after that. Conservative Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said flights to Rwanda will begin in 10 to 12 weeks, come what may. He has touted the plan as a deterrent to irregular migration, particularly for people crossing the English Channel on treacherous small boats arranged by criminal gangs.
The success of this deterrent doesn't rest on one flight alone. It rests on the relentless, continual process of successfully and permanently removing people to Rwanda with a regular rhythm of multiple flights every month over the summer and beyond until the boats are stopped.
More than 45,000 people took small boats to the UK in 2022. Opponents say that people desperate enough to risk life and limb will not be dissuaded by deportation.
The government needs to create new safe routes to get to the UK. If you did that, nobody would be risking their lives crossing a channel and in the ways that people are having to do at the moment.
The bill seeks to stymie legal challenges, but human rights groups say they will still fight deportations on a case-by-case basis. The UK Supreme Court had previously deemed the deportations unlawful, due in part to Rwanda's poor human rights record.
Well, to discuss that news coming out of the United Kingdom, I'm very pleased now to be joined by Wanda Wyporska. She's the CEO of Safe Passage UK, which works to reunite child refugees with their families. Good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for joining us. Can I ask you, first of all, does your organisation work with people who are now at risk of deportation to Rwanda?
Yes, absolutely, because at the moment, we don't know who is at risk. We can safely say that the government says it has got a list of people, and all of the refugee organisations in the UK are really, working with people who are at risk to see how they can support them. And we know that some of our fellow organisations are planning to take legal action on individual cases.
Have you heard any reaction yet from some of those people that you work with, these people who could be sent to Rwanda, how it is that they feel about that prospect?
Well, we know that, our work is basically to reunite child refugees with their families. And the reasons that they're coming to the UK is because they have an aunt or an uncle. Let's remember these children have gone through unbearable things in terms of war, conflict, exploitation. They've made the passage across the Mediterranean often, and then they get to the UK and they receive some sanctuary while they're waiting for their asylum claims to be heard. And now they're fearing that they will be put on a plane and deported to Rwanda. Now, especially the children we work with know that, the moment they turn 18, that they may be eligible to be on one of these flights.
Indeed, and I know in a statement your organisation has put out, you've called this a cruel decision by the UK government. But can you shed some light as to whether you think it is, according to the government's metrics, actually going to work? Will it deter people, asylum seekers who are currently here in France, from making that dangerous journey and coming to Britain?
Well, absolutely not. And it's really disingenuous of the Prime Minister to say that to use the passage of this inhumane bill to say that this will deter the boats and it will stop the people smugglers. We know what will stop the people smugglers. It's providing safe routes into the UK so that people have a visa, they come, as we've seen when we offered sanctuary to Ukrainians fleeing war and conflict, they were able to get on a plane and come safely to the UK. If he wants to stop us waking up in the morning to find that, a 4 or 5 year old child has died along with others in the Channel, then this is the easy thing that he can do.
Can I ask you this? It's quite likely there will be an election in the United Kingdom this year, if not at the very beginning of next year. And the opposition party, the Labour Party, have said, look, they don't support this Rwanda plan. They're going to repeal it. So actually, beyond the talk it's generating in the media and in the next couple of days, is this actually going to have a big impact on the people that you work with?
Well, of course, because at the cost of 1.8 million per person, we are probably going to see 300 people on a plane for what can only be seen as electioneering purposes. So although we do expect a potential Labour government, if they get into power, to repeal this awful bill, we've still got to think about the lives and the families that are going to be torn apart by whatever happens in these next weeks, because this has become an election point. It's a point of principle for Rishi Sunak to get a plane off the ground, and not think about the impact that this is having on families that have already been through absolute hell, to now be faced with the thought of being put on a plane and sent to Rwanda, torn away from their families. And this is impacting people. We know that people are now feeling, their mental health is in a much poorer place. Some people are even suicidal, we've heard, because they just don't know what's going to happen next.
Indeed, and you say this is political point scoring on behalf of the government ahead of that election. Is it also then a sort of hangover from Brexit? Because we all remember that rallying cry of Brexiteers was to take back control, and these small boats that are still entering UK waters is an indication, I suppose, that they don't have control in the way that the Brexiteers see it. So is this sort of about fulfilling a Brexit pledge, do you think?
Well, I think, there's a very easy way to take back control, if you want to use that phrase, and that's by giving the Home Office enough money and resource to actually have the caseworkers to deal with the asylum cases, so that we wouldn't have such a huge backlog. Because this plan will not deter people. Many people don't know about the Rwanda bill. They don't know that if they come to the UK, as we've said, to try and reunite with their family, which is all that's left to them, that they may face deportation to Rwanda. So, we know that this is not necessarily a deterrent, and we can only hope that legal challenges will impact, that we will not see planes take off, and we will not see these families who've already been through so much torn apart yet again.
And just a final question. You mentioned the ways in which Ukrainians are being brought to the UK via legal mechanisms. You've said you'd like to see that for people coming from other countries as well. Can you just spell it out for us? What would you like the government to do more clearly to make sure that those safe routes do exist?
So to introduce a visa, to introduce the possibility of getting a visa from a neighbouring country if you're in a country that's in conflict and obviously you can't get to, to the consulate or to the embassy, and to do what they had promised to do, which is basically say that we don't necessarily need the biometric testing that many people, for example, in Gaza or in other places, are finding hard to actually go and do the biometric testing before they come over, to introduce a refugee visa. And that would mean that people would be able to get on a plane and come over rather than risking their lives in the Mediterranean, across Europe, being trafficked and exploited, and then getting to the north of France and once again putting their lives in danger.
Wanda Wyporska, the CEO of Safe Passage UK. Thanks very much indeed.